Hello everybody at the big draw. My name's Oly Bliss. Thank you so much for inviting me back. It's a real pleasure to be back here, and we are doing something wintry and festive today. So for those of you who have not seen me before, my name's Oly Bliss. You are welcome to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. There is also links in my bio to my little shop, which gives you access to these postcards, which I'm running very low on actually, but they're from this project called Soft Lads. And also to purchase over there is this anthology, which has got lots of lovely images inside of my work, alongside all the poems which people contributed as we were developing the project. They are responding to the figures and themes in the work. So please feel free to go check that out. Anyway, on with this session today. So we're looking at something lovely and wintry. I have used some card on here because I want to make a little Christmas gift for a friend, and we will be using the wonderful Derwent Chromaflow pencils, which blend really nicely with a little bit of water, and can create really rich pigments. So for those of you which are using that, you'll find this a really great fun exercise to get involved in. First of all, to make this lovely little scene, I just want to pre-sketch the landscape which we're going to make, and it will give me a chance just to introduce a couple of points of information which can be helpful. So when I'm creating a landscape like this, I like to think about my landscape in thirds. So we've got top third, middle and bottom, and that can just help create a nice general composition. So if I create a line across this top third, and we're going to have a little cross in the center, and that's going to act as our vanishing point. Now, a vanishing point, if you look out on the horizon, you've got a long vista, let's say, you'll find that you can't really see anything beyond that point, and all the things vanish. But then, as you get closer, things become bigger and more in perspective. So if I'm just showing, like for an example, a gate, or which is going along a very open plain, we might see some posts which are quite thick in the foreground, but then as they go into the distance, they might appear a bit thinner and go into nothingness. But if we want to create nice sense of perspective which is even, we should create lines which follow in together in this format, so that going from the point of the height of the object, and following that down to the vanishing point. So the next one would be this level and this level and this level, and that just gives you a sense of distance. So that's just a really quick introduction to that as a concept. But using a little sketchbook, we can give ourselves the opportunity just to plot out how we want our scene to look. And because of the landscape that we're creating is natural, it's going to appear organic, and it will and can change from person to person. So this is a really great activity which you can do by yourself, or you can do with the family. And what I want to start with, to give the eye something to look at, is a nice bendy path which will vanish off into the distance. So I'm going to plot out that horizon, and it gives me a nice chunk of landscape to play with. And we'll have a vanishing point in the distance here, and we're going to have a meandering path. And a good way to do that is doing a kind of snaky S. So if I go around and worm it around, and as I showed previously, we want to have in the distance a thinner line, and then coming out to a thicker line. So if we start off thin, and then we just make it broader and wider still. And you can actually make that thicker along here, and that will give you a nice snaking S. And then we'll want some hills and some trees to help make this landscape more interesting. In the background, we might also think about it being a bit more dramatic, per se. And then we might create something which is more undulating along this part. So we might go like that. And we can have some more undulation over here. And that can just give us a sense of distance. So this is the background, and this will be the most in shadow because it's out of the way. Further afield, as you go through the sense of distance, things can appear more misty, potentially more opaque, and that's because of the atmosphere is diffusing what we can see in the light. So we've got more light coming over here. We're also going to include a lovely moon, and you can think about the size of the moon that you want and the placement of the moon. I might even bring my moon over here, and this is why it's good to have a sketch. And then what you'll be wanting to do is create some rings which will show where the light's hitting and then how the light fades out. And once we've got those kind of things in place, we'll think about some trees. So because I've cut this section here, I might want a tree just to cover that as well. So then no one will know that there was any of that line work going on when it comes to actually creating my image. I might want, because this is going to be quite a big tree, a smaller tree over here. We might even have two, who knows? And then maybe just for effect, a little tree in the distance. And what we could do, if we wanted to, could have a house just there in the distance, so it looks like you're coming to a nice little cozy cabin. We might have some foliage surrounding that, or you might have a person who stood, and you want to think about your perspective in contrast to the tree. But I'll just give you an opportunity to think about the layout of your overall image that you're going to create. So I'm going to keep it nice and simple for this one, but I just wanted to illustrate what some of the things that you can do. So let's start, first of all, by just giving myself that horizon line. And I'm just putting it in quite faintly at the moment, and it will reveal itself a lot more as we go forward. And then I want that vanishing point in the distance, which I'm thinking about. So from there, I'm going to create a nice, suggestive, windy road. And we'll come back in on itself and snake off like that. And from that point, I'm going to think about where the landscape's going to be created. So I think I still want that nice undulating hill over on this side. So we'll keep that one in there. And then in the distance, I want a bit more dramatic hillside, because maybe there's a little forest there. It's the same as that bit there. But it's really going to come to this kind of closure where we can't see anything beyond that. And that might continue over there. And then we're going to create a section where we've got a bit more drama coming in here. It's got another nice hill. And so the eye nicely bends and follows this route round, and that can be quite appealing. So that gives us also a nice sense of the background and the areas of the foreground. And now this moon. So I want my moon, I think going for a middle-sized moon, bang in the middle-ish, just off to the side. But then I want to create these little lines just to indicate where the most light is going to be, and then as it gets darker in the night sky there. And because I've got the bend here, I want my tree to come in at this point. Nice big solid tree. And I still quite liked the tree over here, so we're going to do a little smaller one there. It's quite a nice place for a tree, why not? And then one in the further distance just to help give this perspective. I quite like, maybe we'll have 3 simple trees just beneath. And maybe even a couple in the far distance. There we go. So that gives us a nice overview of a landscape, which we're going to work into. So first of all, I want to illustrate my moon and make it really pop out. So I'm going to be working in blue tones today. And I actually selected a range of blues for this activity. And we go into some purple colours. And that's because there's quite a nice harmony in terms of how these go across. It's called an anilonious colour scheme. So these are similar in a spectrum of colour to each other, because there is different levels of blue in each of these. But the purple has more magenta or more red in it, and that gives it its warmer tone. Whereas this lighter blue, closer to a cyan, is a cooler colour. And I'm working on the side of the pencil, quite roughly, quite fast, and going in kind of circles. And because the card which I'm using is slightly thicker and cold press, so it doesn't have much of a grain. But depending on the grain of the card or the paper that you use, will actually give you different effects. So if you're working in a sketchbook and you want to work with these Derwent colours, you'll probably want to get their sketchbook for their watercolours and their pastels, the cold press or warm press. The warm press will give like a bigger, kind of more grainier effect, whereas the cold press is smoother. So depending on your preference, you'll get different effects which come through on your mark making as you use the pencils. So I've done an initial layer, and now I'm just going back over quite thickly, getting a couple of marks into my moon. That's okay, because they all blend out. And then this next layer, still working in this colour, but then I'll introduce this colour, and that will help me show the gradation. But first I'm going to put some more detail into the moon, and I'm actually working quite hard. And this bit you can be quite playful with if you want to. If you want to create lines to show the beams of the moon, as it were, you can do that. And you can also create differences in how much of that is seen. So you can see I've just created some slightly darker tones here, but I'm allowing the lighter tones of the same colour to appear like there's different amounts of light with this moon. And that's just by increasing the amount of pressure which I'm applying to the pencil. So it's quite playful, quite free. And if you wanted to, you could actually provide a completely different texture underneath and do a rubbing over the top, and that can give you some really nice marks too. But then, so for this section, going up to here, we're going to go in a bit thicker, and we're following the curve of the moon around. There we go. And as you get closer, I've used some frog tape, but you can use masking tape for your tape. If you draw down and away from where your tape is, it will create your pigment going on it, and it won't pull up against the actual tape. So that's just a little tip for you. So going down and over, and already this feels quite icy and like a nightscape, doesn't it? Just by having that little bit of added texture in there, it's really nice. And so I'm going in with a slightly darker blue, so a slightly richer blue, and just make it nice and sharp. And that can really help get your length of your point. And so working back in this next area, and the lighter blue and this darker blue are blending. And now this darker blue is by itself in this section, and I'll use an even darker shade to help blend with that. So again, working downward strokes from the tape. Same on this side, it's a downward motion. And don't worry if you cross over into your landscape line, that's absolutely fine. Also, just don't apply too much pressure if you want it nice and long, because you can snap the top like I've just done. There we go. Yeah, that's really nice. And if you want to just add like just a few marks of your darker blue in with your lighter blue, that can give it some nice distance as well. So really lovely. So now adding it by itself, again working quite firmly, but along the length of the pencil. And now crossing over into these areas. There we go. And then, because I'm coming up to this close edge, so I'm going to go back into where the darker blue is, and this is like the next level blue. It's almost purpley by this stage. It's just really nice when it's by itself. Look at that. So this is the darker area of the night, and that's because we're furthest away from the luminous moon. And then I'm going to show you a bit of an interesting, slightly unusual trick, because we've got that purple there, but I'm actually going to introduce some yellow in a second, and that yellow will almost create a green. Let's bring that over. So this yellow in this darkest area here will work as a kind of opposite to this purple, this purpley blue, and you can see it makes it really dark. And then we just work back over the top of it. Because in terms of colour works in a spectrum, your yellows are opposite to your purples, that kind of yellowy tone. So they kind of neutralise and go into a really dark shade with each other. when they're applied like this. So you can see the real depth of darkness there, the depths of the dark. But I want to make all of this blend together. So I'm gonna use this blue to take me all the way back. Ooh, there we go. Just take it all the way in. And as you apply this colour, you can almost feel a light buttery texture on the page. And that's because the surface of the paper almost contains ridges. And as you press down with your pencil, the pigment is creating a layer on top. And the ridges are still underneath it. But as you apply more colour, it fills those ridges, and that's when you kind of get this slightly velvety texture instead. And that means that you've probably reached the capacity that the paper can take, or your card can take, depending on what you've used. So that's coming along nicely. I'm just going to add a bit more darkness on the right hand side now as well. So it's just blending it all together. Very nice. And again, just going to introduce, don't really get to it by this point, just a little bit, a little splattering of darkness there, just to kind of also frame the border of the piece. And I also just want to make this moon really luminous, so I'm just adding in a couple of little bits of yellow just to make it pop.